Today on the podcast, Coinflip win in Calgary. Tonight's game against Edmonton. And speaking of Edmonton, how about that Battle of Alberta, ladies and gentlemen? We'll talk about all of that. We'll talk a little bit about the game Saturday at Winnipeg because I will actually be there. To be determined whether we actually have a podcast for that game or not. Trying to find a workaround while I'll be staying in some hotel in Winnipeg. And we'll also talk a little bit about Zach Sanford, about Vladdy Tarasenko, and whatever other news is on my mind. Let's just jump right into it. This is the Blues Rants Podcast. You are listening. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Blues Rants Podcast. As always, I am your host, Philip Miller. Welcome to the show. If you're tuning in from either Twitter or from YouTube at BluesRantsCom, we thank you very much for tuning in, and let's get the show underway. First things first, 5-4 shootout win in Calgary. Hooray for games that are pointless. We'll get into the win on on Tuesday. I have a lot of back-to-backs this week. One coming up tonight and tomorrow. We'll get into the game tonight against Edmonton. We'll get into the game that's tomorrow against Winnipeg. Talk a little bit about Zach Sanford. And the, of course, long-awaited Battle of Alberta. But starting off, 5-4 shootout win in Calgary on Tuesday. Good way to get back into the win column for the St. Louis Blues. They were winless in their last three straight. Started the Canadian road trip on the wrong foot despite a brilliant Thatcher Demko back in Vancouver. But they got a solid win in Calgary. Said none of the Blues players. I don't think I've ever... Does it seem like ultimate first world problems when you get a win and you're angry about it? Because that's what I heard from every single Blue that took interviews following that win. And yes, it was a shootout win. And yes, the penalty kill was atrocious. 3 for 4, and the Flames took it pretty handily. Despite the fact that the Blues had a pretty solid penalty kill going into that game. But still got the win. And a lot of our main guys, Perron, Berube, O'Reilly included, were pretty disappointed in the win. And I feel there are so many people that are just sick and tired of the shootout. Can we find something else at this point? Like, it was cool for a little while, but it's
tough. I mean,
really
it takes
starting to get
on the ice.
Genuinely. Like, I don't know what a solution would be for that other than just keep having overtimes until somebody buries the puck. But the shootouts just turned into the ultimate coin flip, which I hope is what the name of the stream is right now. And obviously the Blues were completely winless in the shootout going into this game. I think of the... How many have we had? 3, 4, perhaps, shootouts this year? We'd gone donut for whatever. Doesn't matter. We hadn't won one yet. And honestly, I think maybe it was just a matter we got lucky and managed to score on Talbot. I mean, I didn't see anything new. I didn't see any change up to any of the shooters' mentalities going into it. Perron, O'Reilly, and who took the first one? I thought it was 3 rounds, but I forget who took the first face-off. But anyways, talking about Zach Sanford in the game, he was arguably my player of the game. You know, there was obviously a great performance by David Perron. There was Ryan O'Reilly with the shootout winner. Jordan Bennington's numbers were not terrific, but I do not blame him. I do not blame him because if you look at 3-4 of those goals, he didn't have a chance. That was, and again, 3 of them were power play goals. And it was just the Blues ultimately kind of crumbling in front of him. Now, the first one from Matthew Tkachuk, okay, I give a little bit of credit for that because that was like a wild knuckle puck. It might have even glanced like off of Gunnarsson's back, if I recall. I think he was trying to, shy away and block it, and the thing just weirdly sailed over him and just perfectly found itself top shelf. It was a wild, fluky, like lob pass that just found its way into the net. I don't blame Bennington for that one, and I don't blame really anybody for that one. I mean, you can't really script that. The second one, if I recall correctly, came shortly off of the faceoff. Well, they all did. That was one big problem. All of them were, or at least 2 of 3 of them, were less than 20 seconds from the start of the power play, which is the first problem. But you have 2 quick goals going in. The second goal, if I remember correctly, it was just that's right. It was a pass. It was just a simple one-time pass. Jordan Binnington not having a whole lot of help in front of him again. I believe it was Alex Steen that sort of failed to try and corral that play, and that's what contributed to the goal. The third one I do remember, and the third one I think a lot of us remember. It was Justin Falk. Oh boy. I keep telling you, man, every single day my leash is just running shorter on Justin Falk. And maybe that's me looking at the wrong things. Because when I look at Justin Falk, I'm supposed to be perceiving him as an offensive defenseman. Now, of course, he hasn't been producing, which is red flag number 1. But red flag number 2 is this third goal, and I'm going to try and pull it up and look at it myself. But the play comes in behind the net. He's fighting for it. He's trying to get it cleared out. It doesn't get cleared out. Calgary pushes it behind the net again. Instead of getting back to your corner, instead of getting back towards the near side and block any other passes towards the slot, he tries to engage the guy at the back of the net. Okay, I get man-on-man coverage. But in this situation, you're leaving the complete left side, I have to think backwards, the complete left side of Jordan Binnington wide open. He's got nothing there to the side of him, and he can't see the puck. So before he can even react to the fact that he's now pushing in, and he had such a delayed reaction. It felt like he took an extra step too many, or just one extra cog in his gear was just turning a little slower, determining whether or not he should be pushing in and try to pinch on this play to get the penalty kill and retrieve the puck. But all the same, now he's just caught in this no man's land between where he should be above the crease and where he's not supposed to be, just randomly floating above the trapezoid. And so now you've got a quick little pass over to, who was it, Sean Monahan? And he scores the easiest goal, one of the easiest goals he's ever going to score, because Binnington has no idea where it is, and Sean Monahan just has the simplest little one-timer that he's just got to flick right in, because he's 2 feet in front of the net, because Justin Falk is nowhere near him. I don't know. I'm probably irrationally harsh on Justin Falk, but if this guy, and that I keep hearing the words Pietrangelo insurance, which really scares me unless he just suddenly decides to get his game going. But if Justin Falk is supposed to be insurance for Alex Pietrangelo, who I still can't believe we're talking about just leaving the Blues, I'm not confident about what the fortunes bring for next season. In terms of him, I'm not. Because yes, you'll have Colton Parayko, who I think is the next big guy for the Blues. You've got Vince Dunn, who's going to be solid. I feel like they've got to let Jay Bouwmeester walk, because as incredible as he is still with Colton Parayko as this shutdown pair, I can't see it going much farther. I mean, how old is Jay Bouwmeester now? 36? 35? And he's got, I want to say 3 million, 3.125 maybe. But I can't, even if you were somehow to keep him, you're still in a salary cap crunch. And I like guys like Nico Mikola, and who was it? Jeremy Rutherford had a great article in The Athletic. By the way, subscribe to The Athletic. They just had their 4-year anniversary. You should check them out. They run some really good articles. But Nico Mikola, who has had some solid games, has played some solid minutes in his limited time here with the Blues, I see him getting the call up and being a genuine top 6 next season. I do. I like Nico Mikola's play as a defensive defenseman, not so much an offensive defenseman. But going back to Justin Faulk, I can't, with each passing game, I'm failing to see the value in signing him to this contract. Because he is at, I believe, 4 right now, and then it kicks into 6.5. I'm looking on Cap Friendly. Thank you, Cap Friendly, by the way. Shout out. Yes, 6.5. He's at 4.15 now. He will be at 6.5 for the next 6 seasons. He is at $6.5 million until 2025, 2026. And the man is 27. I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like there's got to be some side objective here to get Justin Faulk going. You know, like I keep looking at the Leafs, and when the turnover happened between Coach Mike Babcock and Coach Sheldon Keefe, who's done a phenomenal job, by the way, so far with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Shout out to Sheldon Keefe. Like, are we now in the discussion of Jack Adams talks? Like, I really think we are with Sheldon Keefe now in the Maple Leafs, because he has turned that squad around, and props to him. But right at around the time that they fired Mike Babcock, I kept hearing a lot of people saying the main objective was to jumpstart Tyson Barrie, who they traded for this past offseason. Because Tyson Barrie had, I think, no points. I think maybe 1 assist or like no assists so far. He definitely didn't have a goal. I remember watching his first goal, and it was, I think, the day or the day after Sheldon Keefe took over. I feel like, as well as the Blues are doing, obviously we're in a pretty comfortable spot, and this is kind of first world problems coming from a defense like the Blues, because you know that teams like New Jersey or Toronto would kill to have the blue line that we have right now. And I say that with a guy like Robert Bortuzzo and Justin Faulk. But I feel like in some ways a side quest, if you will, has to be to somehow figure out what's going on with Justin Faulk. And he's got a no trade clause too, by the way. So sorry for anybody else. That's out of the question. That's no longer an option. Jay Bouwmeester, by the way, $3.25 million. He will be an unrestricted free agent next year. Just to finish up that thought. Now, as for Zach Sanford, as I just mentioned. So Zach Sanford gets a goal and assist, 2 points, 4 shots on goal. He's got to be my player for the game. I thought he looked solid the entire game. He really did. But Zach Sanford, to me, is such an interesting player for the Blues, at least. I want to run some numbers by you. Just some quick numbers that I put in. And not Corsi or Fenwick numbers. Nothing crazy. I'm not going to scare you all off with my nerd talk. But in the first 4 games, let's see, he has dressed in 38 games this season. Almost half. In the first 4 games that he played, no goals, no assists, no points. The next 5 goals, wow, I'm having trouble reading my numbers. The next 5 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Okay. The next 6 games, no goals, no assists, no points, -3 differential. The next 8 games, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points, a +5 on the ice. The next 9 games, 0-0-0, all across the boards, -4. The next 6 games leading up to the win against Calgary, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points, a +6 differential. Now, those numbers would say he's trending upwards. But does that mean let me just get my watch out here, for the next week and a half, 2 weeks, is he just going to be invisible? I feel like we want Zach Sanford to be a top 6. We want Zach Sanford to play well with Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron, as O'Reilly and Perron have just been those two plus guy for the entire season comfortably on that second line. And we want Zach Sanford to improve that to the top 6 potential that he has. But just by the stats alone that I just read you, can you have a player that's that streaky? And yes, of course, he gets bumped down to the 4th line and the 3rd line sometimes. And credit to the Blues' depth for how far it's come along. It's done incredibly well. But is Zach Sanford still the guy that we want to try and go top 6? And if Doug Armstrong has clearly said multiple times that he's in pursuit of a top 6 depending on Vladimir Tarasenko's status. So we'll probably figure that out within the next couple of weeks, like mid to late February as the trade deadline quickly approaches. And of course, probably the number one guy that the Blues are in pursuit of would be a guy like Kreider, as are like 6 other teams right now. I think I heard Bob McKenzie say earlier today. But I mean, if you want to try and trade Zach Sanford for Chris Kreider, there's going to have to be a lot more involved. And Armstrong has already noted that he's also not interested in trading depth picks. He's not interested in trading low picks like from the 3rd to the 6th round on. And again, I love Chris Kreider. I really do. But given the fact that he'd basically be a rental, I'm not sure if we'd have the money to re-sign him to begin with. But if we did, that puts us even more of a cap crunch. A ridiculous cap crunch. Right now, if Vladimir Tarasenko stays injured until playoffs, that gives us $7.5 million to work with. If we don't, that gives us $20,000 in total. So I'm still really not sold at all on Zach Sanford. And as far as being a top 6, being a depth guy, sure. Why not? I mean, slog it out in the musical chairs roulette alongside of Sundqvist and Steen and Blais and McEachern and Barbashev and whoever, because it seems like every single player I've just mentioned has been injured at some point or another. By the way, Alex Steen should be in tonight's lineup. He did exit the game against Calgary early with a lower body injury after scoring a goal, but he should be back in for tonight, which is great news. I'll get to that a little later. But as far as bottom 6 goes for Zach Sanford, I'm totally fine. Top 6, I'm still not sold. Not if you can't bring some form of consistency to the point where if you're literally just going 4 to 5 games without a point and then just going the next 5-6 games crushing it, and then you're just going to 8-9 games and you're just a ghost. I'm still not crazy about that. If I want a top 6 guy, I need more consistency. I need a guy like Chris Kreider. And of course, everybody's been talking about Zach Sanford being probably the optimal guy that gets traded in some form of trade for Chris Kreider. But it's not going to be 1-for-1. You've got to give something much more substantial there. And Armstrong's really confident in the depth, and he doesn't want to give away low picks. So do you really give up your first round pick for a guy like Kreider, who's probably not going to be here next season? Do you give up your second round pick? And the Blues going into the draft have all of their picks up to round 5, and they also have the 5th round pick thanks to the Justin Falk Joel Edmondson trade. Beyond that, they're sitting pretty well. They do not have their 6th and 7th round picks for 2020. But for 2021, they're missing their 7th and their 2nd round picks. And for 2022, they've got all their picks across the board. Nothing additional, nothing less. So it'll be interesting to see if Armstrong is really that interested in a guy like Kreider, in a guy like Tyler Toffoli, even a guy like Alex Galchenyuk. You never know. And that was also that was a really great article that Jeremy Rutherford wrote on some of the other potential trade targets. Let me see if I can pull it up on here. And meanwhile, while I pull that up on here, I was really excited to see that Alex Steen is back in the lineup because tonight's game against the Oilers would be game number 999 for Alex Steen. Saturday, tomorrow, he plays Winnipeg, which I mentioned I will be at. Game number 1,000. And just if you're aware, he's from Manitoba, Winnipeg. So how poetic and how wonderful would it be if he gets game number 1,000 in his hometown? And how wonderful it would be if he scores, because he's actually been pretty good the last few games. As I'm still trying to pull up this Athletic article. As for the rest of the night, Jaden Schwartz had a goal in his 500th game. That was really great to see. Congratulations to Jaden on that. That goal by Alex Steen, however, I wanted to also mention. That's a guy I do like going on into our top 6, is Robert Thomas. Robert Thomas still continues to impress me with his pass work because if you watch the play formulate, he gets it into the zone. He's quickly looking over his options. No, excuse me. I beg your pardon. Alex Steen carries it into the zone. Great stretch pass all the way down to the other point. He gets into the zone to carry it. Draws 2 players in. I believe he drew in his own man, but then he also draws in Milan Lucic. Milan Lucic starts pressing in way too far on him, and that leaves Alex Steen absolutely wide open, and I swear this guy's passes are like magnets. I don't know how he does it. He just finds these guys every time. He's got to be one of the better passers in the league. I'd have to look up stats to see who's better, and I'll actually talk about stats here in a second, since I myself am such a stat head. But to see Robert Thomas just make these passes night in and night out every single time, that type of consistency, that is what I like to see in my top 6. And that's why Robert Thomas is doing so well. I love the fact that this is probably, obviously since like Vladimir Tarasenko or maybe even Jordan Kyrou, you could argue that this has got to be our best first round pick to date, if you consider all of our former picks. Now, Klim Kostin is on a struggling Buffalo Sabres. I got to find audio of that, by the way. I don't know if anybody heard that, any of these guys calling in on the radio about the Buffalo Sabres, but whew, man, oh man, this guy leaves it all out on the line, and it is pretty dismal situation over in Buffalo right now for the Sabres. But just to continue on real fast, looking in tonight's game versus Edmonton, and we'll talk about the Battle of Alberta here in a second, but this should be a really interesting one for kind of the exact same reasons that Calgary is so interesting, because now you've got the Blues have now been sandwiched. So you have the Blues playing the Flames. They won in the shootout. That was great. The very next night, you have possibly one of the most entertaining regular season games you will see all season. It was phenomenal. It completely lived up to the hype for me. And now you've got the Blues playing Edmonton, the other side of that contest tonight. And then tomorrow, guess what? It's Battle of Alberta 2.0. So again, maybe it's the level of focus. And Edmonton did lose in a shootout to Calgary, which was, again, I hate the shootout, but it was still a fitting ending. And you've got Riddick with the stick, with the bat throw, with his goalie stick. I loved that. That was phenomenal. But now you've got the Blues and you've got Edmonton. And Edmonton is going to be probably stung about the shootout loss on Wednesday. And now they're coming in against the Stanley Cup champions. And they've got to do it all over again for the Battle of Alberta tomorrow. So I think maybe the level of focus might be different there. Stop Connor McDavid. I say try to stop Connor McDavid because you can't. He's just been an absolute machine. Him and Leon Draisaitl as well. Draisaitl's maybe cooled off just a bit. Not really, but a little bit. And then, of course, they've got a lot of decent depth players. I know we haven't heard of Ethan Bear's name in a while, and the Zach Kassian contract, that's interesting to me, but okay. I suppose if you're just going to play next to the greatest player in the world, you're probably going to look good for a little while, i.e. David Perron. So it should be an interesting contest tonight. We'll see if the Blues can pull out the win. I'm trying to look up the projected lineups for tonight's game. I'm assuming it would be Jake Allen in net this evening. This makes for great radio. Anyways, I think that would be, again, one of the main keys. They're probably going to they might still be winded from this Battle of Alberta, and they're probably still trying to psych themselves up for tomorrow's game. So once again, I think the Blues might be sandwiched in a couple of games where we're not actually considered a priority, despite the fact that we're number one in the conference. Now, again, every single game, no game is easy to win. And it'll be a tough contest playing against the greatest player in the world. I watched the documentary on Connor McDavid, the Whatever It Takes. I'll try and find the trailer for that here, but wow. Who could have saw that coming? And how did Connor McDavid see that coming? If any of you are not aware, on Sportsnet, Connor McDavid is the centerpiece for a great documentary, all regarding his injury from last season. So game number 82, ironically, they're playing against Alberta. They're playing against the Flames. Mark Giordano, and we'll talk about Mark Giordano in a second, but Giordano gets into a slight collision with Connor McDavid, and he runs his leg straight into the iron. It was a nasty injury. I'm sure all of you saw it or heard about it. McDavid says, I think it's broken pretty much before he can get off the ice. Turns out he completely tears his PCL, the ligament in the back of your leg, I want to say. I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure the PCL is the small ligament in the backside of your leg. Tears a couple of menisci. And rather than take the surgery, he just goes through rehab. Of course, that's worked out really well for him, because if he had taken the surgery, turns out we'd still not have Connor McDavid right now. And he definitely would not be the player that he is. So I'll actually just here's the trailer from Sportsnet on Connor McDavid, Whatever It Takes.
Here comes McDavid. McDavid flying in, and he crashes into the Flames net. Holding his left leg, and he is still down on the ice, as you can see.
It's the left leg that makes the initial contact right there.
I thought my leg was in two pieces. I was just worried to stand up. I thought my leg was just going to give away it.
And they are going to try to get him up onto his feet here.
Our fear for Connor throughout his career so far is he's going too fast.
I held it together until we got through the tunnel, and I was a mess.
PCL's cut right in half. Here, the back of the knee joint, there's a lining that's completely torn. He's torn many other things. Not only a bone bruise, but a crack in the front of his tibia.
And basically, he said that the doctor told him that if he didn't have surgery, like now, he needed surgery. There was no question of that.
I gotta make this decision at 22, and I gotta make it in 24 hours. It was already scheduled. The surgery was scheduled.
We knew if he had surgery, it was going to be a 10-month rehab.
To go a non-surgical route with that severe of an injury, I've never done that before.
He certainly questioned whether or not he would have a career, whether he would play at the start of the season.
I looked at my calendar and I said, training camp? And he said, yep. And I said, okay, we've got work to do.
Connor McDavid made the decision. He wanted to rehab this. No one has done what Connor has done to rehabilitate himself back from a serious knee injury in that period of time.
And Connor is back in business.
So that was a fantastic documentary. I highly recommend you all watch it. It's on Sportsnet. It's truly, like, I was kind of blown away by it. I mean, this guy's got first of all, he's the greatest player in the game right now, and he suffers an injury like that, and he's basically told that you've got either two options: you've got surgery or rehab. And the surgery, he said 10 months, so that puts him back, if we're talking the regular season ending in April, he'd probably be back like in a couple of weeks. And we all know he definitely would not be the player that he has been for the last 3, 4, 5 years. And instead, he rehabs it. It was pretty much 10 weeks, 7 days a week of physical rehab. And I mean, he was an all-star, and he's looked probably just as good, if not better, than he ever has. It was really something incredible to see. Shout out to, I believe his personal doctor / trainer was Mark Holiday, if I have that correct. But just a crazy story, man. And of course, you know, I was hearing it all over on every single sports network for a while. But absolutely wild stuff by Connor McDavid. And it's just better for the game that he's in it, right? I mean, it makes the Edmonton Oilers watchable again. I mean, you watch the Edmonton Oilers for Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And I hope they get into the playoffs. I genuinely hope they get into the playoffs. Because Connor McDavid, as it's shown, has played too well and worked too much to not get into the postseason. It's almost a crime. But anyways, so we've got tonight's game against Edmonton. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Battle of Alberta was on Wednesday, and what a game it was. If you had to pull names out of a hat and make the two players fight, that is about the equivalent of what you would have got with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and who was the other combatant? Sean Monahan. Yes, Sean Monahan dropping the gloves. That one, I don't think anybody saw coming. I mean, you could put a bet on it, and it probably wouldn't have happened any other time. But interesting fight by those two. And then, of course, the one we were all waiting for, Zach Kassian and Matthew Tkachuk, round 2. We could get round 3 on Saturday. Who knows? But I find it interesting also that Zach Kassian was like, oh, hey, yeah, good job, kid. Isn't Zach Kassian like 27 and Matthew Tkachuk is 22, 23 or something like that. Like, they're not, not like Cassian is not that old, and Kachuk by sports standards is not that young. I found that kind of weird. And considering the context of their last fight, which, by the way, I considered dirty by Matthew Kachuk. I mean, I did not like any of the hits that Matthew Kachuk throws on. And then, of course, they get in a fight, and as some of you may have seen at the game or on Sportsnet, he turtled. And there was a bunch of fans at the Edmonton game that dressed up as turtles with, Matthew Kachuk's number on it and everything, which I thought was pretty funny. But, I mean, it goes all the way into the shootout. It was an electric night the whole time. David Riddick gets the shootout win on Draisaitl and throws up the stick in the air, bat flip style. That had to have been amazing for some Canadian fans. But also the Mark Giordano incident, if you will. So just for some quick context, so Connor McDavid is doing his thing, moving up the wing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And he's trying to work his way past Mark Giordano, and it looks like from certain TV angles that he kind of sweeps his leg out at the very last second. Why and how the hell do you do that? I mean, seriously, if you are Mark Giordano, the captain of the Calgary Flames, against the other captain of the Edmonton Oilers, and you both were involved in the exact same near career-ending injury last year, I don't understand what possesses you to do that. I'm serious, that's just not cool. You know the ramifications, and Connor McDavid got lit up. He got angry. He got angry at the refs, and Connor McDavid's a quiet kid. Connor McDavid is not one to do that. We all know that. So to see him get barking and get real angry, I mean, he was furious on the bench. They were playing replays of it, and they were showing him. And a lot of sports stations have been saying the same thing. Like, if it was anybody but Connor McDavid, if it was anybody but a guy like Mitch Marner or Austin Matthews for Toronto, or even guys like Patrick Kane or Tyler Seguin or Nikita Kucherov, what have you, we wouldn't be having the same reaction probably today. But because it was the same two parties involved, because it's the captain of the freaking teams, and because this exact same thing happened to Connor last year, less than a calendar year ago, on Game 82, and made the career-altering decision that he's incredibly lucky to be playing right now. I mean, I would completely understand how Edmonton fans would feel a little bit outraged, because that's ridiculous. I mean, yes, we talk about trying to protect our superstars with enforcers, which can't really happen in today's league anymore. But, everybody from Wayne Gretzky to Mario Lemieux to Gordie Howe, whoever said I wouldn't have scored as much if it wasn't for insert player here. Brett Hull has said as much, that I wouldn't have scored as much if I didn't have Tony Twist or Kelly Chaser looking at every single guy on the ice and say, if you lay a finger on him, if you breach the thought of touching Brett Hull, I will absolutely bury you into next week. I understand that's probably, to that game, that Battle of Alberta was probably the closest we're going to ever get to that mentality again. But all the same, you have to have some form of mentality that for these goal scorers, there's got to be a line drawn. Specifically with Connor McFreakin David. At some point, there has to be a line drawn where it's like, okay, he's already gone through this severe injury and almost would have been out of the game entirely. I shouldn't do that kind of thing again. And there were multiple angles of it. Some that, came to the aid of Mark Giordano where it looked like it wasn't actually intentional and whatnot. But come on, man. Like, there's got to be a line somewhere. Especially when you're the one that injured him last year. And he felt bad for that one. He did feel bad for that one. So I don't understand the motivation to doing that exact same thing again. It's reprehensible to me. And okay, yes, there's the, oh, hockey's gotten too soft and we want it to be more like the 80s. You had that. You had that in that game. But this is a little bit different. I'm sorry, this is a little bit different. This is a little bit overstep. We don't want Colorado and Vancouver of almost a decade and a half ago now. So that's all I'll say about that. And I'm also incredibly excited to see if Battle of Alberta 2.0 lives up to the hype as well. The most interesting final thought about that, by the way, was also the fact that the entire NHL player safety was there. Or not the entire player safety, but all like the most important pertaining members. Like what are they gonna do? Just suspend the guy the moment he lays a finger on somebody else that they consider is too far? Like were they monitoring Matthew Tkachuk and Zach Kassian? Like I wasn't exactly sure of the motivations behind that, but okay, yeah, sure, whatever. Saturday's game against Winnipeg. Just on the off chance I'm not able to record the next show, talking about that one. Oh boy, where do you want to start with Winnipeg? I'll give them props for coming as far as they have. I'll start with that. Winnipeg, obviously, they've lost 4 in a row. They're winless in 4 straight, I believe. They're sitting 6 out of 7th in the Central Division behind the Blackhawks, or tied with the Blackhawks. They sit just 2 points out of last, ahead of the Minnesota Wild. Again, you've got the whole Dustin Byfuglien, I beg your pardon. You've got the whole Dustin Byfuglien controversy that still has gone unresolved. You had a massive exodus of your blue line. Everybody from Myers to Jacob Trouba to there was a huge, pretty much the entire right side just vanished, like in one fell swoop, including Dustin Byfuglien. And of course, who eventually comes out of the woodwork to come save the day? Connor Hellebuyck. And Connor Hellebuyck was playing Vezina level hockey for the first season, and that quantified as such when he got his all-star bid in. But now Hellebuck's starting to fall back to earth, and with that, the rest of the team's stats fall hard. I mean, they, in terms of expected goals for, in terms of saves above average, they have fallen off of a cliff, and it's gotten real bad. It's gotten real bad over in Winnipeg. I feel for them. And again, I gave them props for staying in that race as long as they did, and they're not necessarily out of it. They are 6 points out of third place on the Dallas Stars with 54. The Stars have 60, and the Avalanche have 62. But I mean, I'm really questioning Nashville, Winnipeg, San Jose. I think if any team is hitting the panic button more, it's got to be those 3 teams. Because you have an underperforming roster in Nashville. You've fired the head coach. It's not gotten you very far. You're 5-4-1 in your last 10. You've got, again, you sign Matt Duchene and you let Subban go, which, okay, retroactively, that was a smart move, as we found out. But pretty much your best performer right now is Ryan Ellis and Roman Josi. I mean, we have not heard much at all from guys like Johansson or Forsberg or Granlund. Bonino. Anybody see Nick Bonino score on his own net? What do you think they would do for that? Oh, it's an own goal! Bonino. Okay, all right. That's enough of that. I'm sorry, Nashville. And then as for the San Jose Sharks, ooh, yipes, man. I mean, not only the fact that they're scraping the bottom of the barrel along with the other two California teams, but you also don't have your first round pick because you lost it to Ottawa. I mean, I don't want to say Ottawa's celebrating a team losing as bad as they are. They are a minus 38 goal differential. That is worse than anybody in the Western Conference. That is worse than the last place Kings. I mean, you re-sign a guy like Aaron Dell. You got Aaron Dell and Martin Jones as your tandem, and you think you can still be going somewhere? You got the oldest team in the roster. You got the oldest roster in the NHL. You let Pavelski walk. You re-sign a guy like Brendan Dillon, which might even become now like a trade topic. I mean, it is bad. It is bad in San Jose. And when you can't tank just to try and get your first round pick because you've already given it up, oh boy, you're in trouble, man. That's trouble all over. And I mean, Winnipeg's in a slightly more stable boat. I mean, I think Winnipeg's got to be having the most disappointing season out of any team in the NHL right now. Vegas is still in that really close race for the Pacific Division. And, you know, they fired their head coach mysteriously. And Marc-Andre Fleury hasn't been up to snuff lately. But, I mean, you lose half of a blue line, and the effects have certainly shown. You lose guys like Bufflin, Trouba, and Myers, and the effects are right there in front of us all. They're now 7th in the Central Division, 25, 22, and 4. And as nice as it is to have a goaltender like Hellebuck literally strapping the entire team to its back and carrying it to the playoffs, you got a minus 8 goal differential. That ain't gonna fly. That ain't gonna fly. Not in this league, not in the Central Division. So, tough waters right now in Winnipeg. We'll see how the Blues do against the Jets. You almost at some point maybe consider that it's like a trap game, because I think Winnipeg's probably still wanting to get there. I don't think they're in tank mode yet, despite having a pretty bad record, despite being so low in the standings. And I don't think Paul Maurice is going to be like a coach to go or anything like that. But you got to be careful of this game against Winnipeg, because despite all the standings, you know, there's still a really heated division rival. We obviously took them to 6 last year in the playoffs. And they were still a wagon of a team then, too. So, should be an interesting one out in Winnipeg as they continue this road trip. But tonight, as I said before, matchup against the Edmonton Oilers. Game will be starting in about 10 minutes. Again, huge key to the game will be to try and take advantage of whatever energy or lack thereof they have from these two Calgary contests before and after. And again, it's the start of the back-to-back. So if you can get a win at the start of the back-to-back, that'll give you a lot of confidence going into the second half, no matter who's on deck. Final news of the day, Vladimir Tarasenko. I was pleasantly surprised by this. I did not expect this. His jersey sales, they are second in the nation. Number two player for jerseys sold, only behind the kid, Sidney Crosby, Sid the Kid. Ahead of guys like Marchand or Pasta or Ovechkin. Shout out to Alex Ovechkin, by the way. Probably scoring the easiest 693rd goal he'll ever score on that. Basically, how many of those Nashville Predators goals were own goals, or goals that they basically just handed over to the Capitals, and the Capitals still lost? I was baffled by that. But all in all, congratulations to Alexander Ovechkin. I don't know, man. I mean, he's the if you consider the generation, he's arguably the greatest natural goal scorer we have ever seen. And he's only continuing to prove that by getting closer and closer to Gretz. I really didn't think we'd ever have this conversation, but Ovechkin, I believe, is, I think 32, 33, and he is still just trucking along. I got to pull up the screenshot. That's the final stat I'm going to give for the day, and I'm going to sign off. That was a fantastic stat I saw. So, of course, he elects not to go to the All-Star game. I completely understand that. And for a guy like Alex Ovechkin, I completely allow that. But, of course, that came with a cost. He was suspended the first game after the All-Star break. That was his penalty. He couldn't play in the next regular season game for the Capitals following the All-Star break. I saw a guy by the name of, hilariously, at Ovechkin. Ovechkin has missed 31 games during his career, an extensive career, almost 15, 16 years. 31 games missed during his career. 9.7 of that is due to all-star suspensions. I mean, 10%. 10% of 31, or 9.7% of 31, 3.1. So basically, you've missed 3 games due to all-star suspensions of 31. Honestly, that's just funny. And I mean, you've got workhorses like Colton Parayko out there, but I found that really funny for as many games that Ovechkin has played and not missed. That was a pretty incredible stat in my mind. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you all very much for listening to the Blues Rants podcast. Again, Blues Oilers in about 10 minutes on Fox Sports Midwest and on ESPN 101.1. Live coverage of play-by-play action on @BluesRants.com. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll tune in next time.